Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dr. Judy WTF at the beautiful Psychological Healing Center. I just feel so at home here. And in the background is the Psychological Healing Center. So if you're not in therapy with one of our wonderful staff, then you're invited to come and visit at the Psychological Healing Center. We have a few locations, and we also do a lot of Skype and teletherapy. And tonight's topic is a topic that is frequently discussed in the therapeutic setting, and the topic is trauma bonding and the WTF. And I will elaborate on this theme and why we keep going back to the herder and doing a what the Freud and repeating and spin cycling through a pattern. So I want to introduce to those of you who have never seen me before the mind map, which is a system of healing I created many years ago. It was meant to heal global disconnect, and then I applied the model to healing human disconnect on a one-to-one basis. The way the model is designed is it's a system. First of all, it's a system of identifying wounds of childhood, which there are 5 of, which I'll list here. Physical abuse, obviously. Emotional verbal abuse, quite obvious. Sexual abuse, again, obvious. Smothering, not so obvious, and neglect, somewhat obvious. So if any one of you have suffered emotional abuse, trauma in your childhood, then you will probably note that you have had some bad reactions to the wound, and you've encoded some very, very sad messages into the fiber of your being, which then becomes trigger points in life and then get activated and create a breakdown of chaos. And then we defend against all that chaos. And then we have a double breakdown in panel 6, which hopefully then becomes a point of choice where people can break through and paradigm shift into a new way of seeing and being in the world. So what is trauma bonding? Trauma bonding is very similar to Stockholm Syndrome in that we get bonded to initially our primary caregiver. In the case of Stockholm Syndrome, we get bonded to the people who are entrapping us in some way, manipulating us in some way. And as a result of this, they have control over us. And we are at the effect of these people, either because we are little, and to quote something that I say in my book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, which is a book that I created years ago to describe this system of healing. And if you don't have a copy, please reach out to me, the Psychological Healing Center, or you can go on my website, psychologicalhealingcenter.com, and drjudywtf.com will get you there, and download a copy just simply by putting in your information, and then you will have a free PDF copy of my book. So, what is a trauma bond? Here's an article: 5 signs you're in a dangerous trauma bond with a toxic person. I'm trying to see the author of this. That's the title of the article. You know they're deceptive and conniving, but you can't seem to let go. You may be a rational, discerning person who sees through all of this person's mind games and attempts to manipulate you. You may very well know that you're being unjustly mistreated. You may even hold some unresolved anger and resentment toward this person for violating you. Yet, whenever you attempt to leave, this toxic person throws you a few crumbs of affection, and you are more than willing to mistake it for the entire loaf of bread. Sound familiar? And this is a call-in show, everyone. So please do call in 323-843-2826. Whenever they're kind, you doubt yourself. You're gaslighted into believing that they really do want the best for you, even while they're busy serving their own self-interest. And the interesting thing about this trauma bond is, let's peel it all the way back to the causal point. What is the blueprint for the trauma bond is that children, babies, infants need to survive. So they have no choice but to latch on to mom, dad, primary caregivers, no matter how they're treated. And so if they're not treated with kindness, with attunement, with unconditional love, then they bond anyway to their parents, to their trauma-causing parents. And so as a result of this, it's a very, very unfortunate one-sided situation, because the parents are not invested, they're fully invested. Their survival mechanism depends on the bond, and so they will do anything to keep the bond, and anything can mean anything from people pleasing later on to being the golden child and becoming an extension of the parent. And there are all kinds of ways that people try to keep this bond going. And the sad thing then is that this energetic field of trauma then gets replicated in future relationships. And this is the WTF, what the Freud part, because the template, the blueprint is mom, dad, a bond, an unhealthy, toxic bond forming here. And the trauma bonding then occurs because the child is literally programmed to survive and hang on to that bond. And if you look at panel number 3 for a moment, this is a great metaphor for the trauma bond. I'm going to use it that way, at least in this case. So we've got, let's say, one strand representing the mom, and let's just say the other strand represents the dad, and the babies are sitting on the ladder, and they're supposed to be protected by mom and dad, and they're supposed to have these pillars of support, except that in the case of parenting gone wrong, they don't have a pillar of support. And sometimes they're even missing a parent, and sometimes they're missing, proverbially speaking, both parents, because they may even be physically there, but not emotionally there. So they glue themselves to this bond, and they hold on for dear life at any cost. And so let's take a look and see what happens when they try to break the bond. They go into panel 4, chaos. And nobody wants to be in chaos. Nobody wants to be emotionally dysregulated and disrupted. So then what do most people do is they crawl back to panel 3, or back to somebody that's like panel 3, and they'll grasp on again. Or they'll go the other direction into defense mechanisms, and these defense mechanisms are very varied. They can be defense mechanisms anywhere from drinking and overeating and porn, and even using other people, relationships as a defense mechanism. And so this WTF spin cycle continues. The pattern is never broken, and even though the original traumatic bonding is no longer in that person's life, let's say the parents are no longer alive even, still the template is there, and energetically they are looking to replicate that relationship because it's familial and it's familiar. And then the other piece of it is that if they this time do it right, then the person that hurt them will then accept them unconditionally. Somehow they will transform, and then they will be healed as a result of this person's deeming them to be good enough or lovable enough or special enough. And this is a really, really toxic situation, and this can go on for the rest of a person's life. I definitely have a lot of people that I see that can relate to this, and callers and letters that I receive, people who can relate to this. And this is a call-in show, so please do feel free to call in. 323-843-2826. So, back to, how do you know you're in a dangerous trauma bond with a toxic person? You do everything to please them and are loyal to a fault, even when they give you nothing in return but pain. And so somewhere in the person's mind is that one day, just one day, that herder, the person that hurts them, is going to get it, and they're going to wake up, and they're going to be sorry about all they've done to you. And then they're going to turn to you, get on their knees, and cry and empathize with how they made you feel, and then you will come out of that whole and complete. And that is a fantasy. And if you want more information on that, I suggest that you watch another video of mine called "The Herder Cannot Be the Healer," because in that video I go into depth about how we keep going back into the energy field of the herder in order to close the psychological file and be healed by the person. But if you think about it, the herder is not well, him or herself, and so how can that person be skilled enough to now heal you of all the damage they did to you? So logically it doesn't make sense, yet psychologically we are driven back to that type of person, and that's when we then look at ourselves and our chaos and say, how did that happen to us? My goodness, we're ending up in the same type of relationship after relationship, and the person still doesn't care about me, and the person is still not invested in me, and the person is still putting him or herself before me. And so why is this showing up? Well, it's showing up because the blueprint is still ingrained into the fiber of your being. And if any one of you can relate to this, please call in. And that number again, 323-843-2826. And I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear about your experience with trauma, with bonding, your panel 1 wounds, as I like to refer to them, from a mind map perspective, your wounds of childhood that incorporate all of the wounds that I mentioned, the physical abuse and the emotional verbal abuse and sexual abuse and neglect and smothering. And any one of these abuses can then instigate that trauma bond, because again we go back, and that's the Freud part of the cycle. Today I was talking to a patient of mine, and I was explaining what the WTF really means, and I was drawing a bell curve kind of a graphic, and I was explaining to this person that the Freud area of this curve is when typically a reaction or a response to an event is within an appropriate range, and the Freud range is when it's way out there, when the reaction is double or triple or 10 times the amount. For example, let's say I step on somebody's toes and they say, "Ow, that wasn't good, you stepped on my toes." And then I say, "Well, I'm really sorry about that. I'll try to be careful next time." Now, what if I step on somebody's toes and they punch me in the nose? Now, I would call that a WTF, because I'd literally look at them and think to myself, WTF, why are you punching me in the nose? I stepped on your foot. Well, if you dial the whole process back to the system gone wrong, it's possible that my stepping on their toes is a trigger point, a major trigger point for being disrespected throughout the course of a lifetime. And so it didn't take much, but that one little step on the toes now opened up a psychological file, and all of the anger is released. And I think you see a lot of this with road rage, where you don't know the person that you're flipping off, and you don't know the person that you're cutting in front of, yet you're projecting an awful lot of WTF feelings on that person. And so we have to, if we want to grow, that is, if we really want to self-reflect and self-correct, we have to look under the psychological hood, so to speak, and see what's in there and see why we're so activated and why we're so overreactive and why it is that our amygdalas light on fire every time something, even a small trigger, occurs in life. So I do want to hear from you. I love call-ins, so please call in 323-843-2826. And I hope we are live on Facebook. I hope. I know last time we had some glitches in the system, so hopefully this time I'm loud and clear and all the technology is working in the favor of the show. So I'm going to go on a little bit more and describe the trauma bonding. You feel addicted to them and lose far more than you gain. You develop an addiction to this person that is not only psychological but biochemical and physiological. There's actually a sense of pain associated when they walk away. And this is very, very much like love addiction, something that I have talked about quite a bit. Your body, mind, and spirit aches for them. Your whole world is starting to revolve around them. So can you see the imbalance of power? Can you see that what's happening here is that you become at the effect, they become the powerhouse, they gain by your pain. And that is what's going on here. The weaker you get, the stronger supposedly they get. And both parties are not well because the person that is engaged in their end of the system that's gone wrong is also in pain and suffering because they need to project their pain on another person. They need to have that one upsmanship in order for them to feel good. They don't have a concept of panel 7, which represents synergy, which represents unconditional love, which represents people who are in it to enhance each other. It's really the 1 + 1 = more than 2 or 3 phenomenon. People engaged in this kind of a toxic bond dysfunctional system do not have the concept that if they engage with another human being, they will be better than, and they will make the other better than. They have the notion that if they engage with another human being, somehow they have to make sure that they're better than, and they don't understand the concept of making that other person a better human being because they're coming from a consciousness of scarcity. There isn't enough light to go around. There isn't enough love to go around. So therefore, they better take all the light that they can and unfortunately take the light out of your mind, body, and soul. You lose sleep, time, endless amounts of energy, countless hours, and copious days of explaining yourself to them. So here is where you're trying to paradigm shift them into reason. You're trying to paradigm shift them into empathy, which isn't going to happen. Trying to get them to see your perspective of attempting to get them to reciprocate your efforts, or even just to stop hurting you. The problem is they lack empathy. The problem is that their psychological walls, so to speak, have become closed up. If you look at panel number 5, you could see a bunch of isms, and these isms represent our defense mechanisms. And in the case of narcissistic injury, the person that the child is trauma bonded with perhaps has shut down their walls and they're not emotionally available to be healthily attached to their child or healthily attached to their friend or partner or coworker or whoever's involved in a relationship with them. You expend vast amount of emotional labor trying to make this person a decent human being, rather than recognizing that they may never change. And this is what the Freud part. They must change. They must change. They must change. Why must they? Because they hold the key. They hold the key to my emotional well-being. If they deem me good enough, if they deem me beautiful enough, if they deem me smart enough, then I'm released out of this psychological prison, and I will have regained my status in my own eyes and maybe in the eyes of the community. You develop a hyper-focus on what can be done to appease them while foregoing what needs to be done for your basic self-care. Again, this is a call-in show, folks, everyone, so please pick up the phone, call in. I know that a lot of people are watching from different parts of the world, and I know that there are different time zones, so if you have stayed up to watch the show, please feel free to pick my mind and get on the couch and shrink your issues. And I think we have a call-in. So hello, you are on the couch with Dr. Judy. And what is your name, please?
Cindy.
I'm sorry?
Cindy.
Hi, Cindy. Did we talk earlier? I think I said call in. Yes?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you calling in. And where are you from so the audience can have kind of a mental picture of where on the map you are?
Deep South, Mississippi.
Okay. So, Cindy, let us mind map your situation and maybe share with the audience what your childhood wounds were so that we can understand how you may trauma bond to people.
I've recently, thanks to your videos, have discovered that I actually had a narcissistic mother.
Okay. And what do you mean by that? Well, I know we throw that word around a lot, narcissistic mother. But what does that mean to you, that your mother was a narcissist? What was the experience you had with her?
Mainly most emotional, and for me, physical abuse.
Okay. And what kind of emotional?
Very controlling.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I have an older brother who was the golden child. He could not do any wrong, no matter what it was, trouble with the law, it didn't matter.
Okay.
In her eyes, he was the golden child.
Okay.
I was definitely the scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
And the way she treated me, and I got a younger sister who was the mascot child.
Yeah.
You helped me to understand that, and it throughout your videos, and it's like we were like completely textbook to every video I have seen over the last few days. And so it's been very eye-opening and enlightening for me. Ironically, my brother is diagnosed with schizophrenia. All three of us have been diagnosed with PTSD.
Yeah.
I've got bipolar 1 disorder. My sister has borderline personality disorder with non-specific bipolar disorder.
Okay. So just not to take away from the flow, but I want to explain to you and the audience that these labels that we use, borderline personality disorder, bipolar, schizophrenia, I look at symptoms and these dis-eases as a manifestation of something gone wrong at the causal level, because the mind and the body are interconnected, and short of some specific organic issue, brain tumor, some sort of something organic gone wrong, we have to look at the nurture part of it. And what we do know is that everybody in your family is symptomatic, and everybody in your family is emotionally dysregulated. So it's not like one person has this BPD and the other one has this NPD and the other one has a bipolar. We can now see that the people in your family who have not been parented in an attachment parenting style, meaning eye contact, skin contact, breastfeeding, stay-at-home parenting, unconditional love, and all of the aspects of nurturing that Dr. John Bowlby, attachment theorist, talks about. If we don't get that, we're not going to be well, and we're not born sick, we're made sick. So can you identify with what I'm saying here?
I absolutely can, and I know for at least 3 generations back, my mother, and she was a twin, her sister, they both talked about things that my grandmother did.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we, the grandchildren, just couldn't fathom that any of that was true.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like with my children, could not believe the things that, I've said about my mother.
Yeah.
And then my grandmother shared things with us. Now, she was born in 1905.
Wow.
And she had to take piano lessons. She was home tutored. She definitely had to do the show for her mother's friends. She talked about how things she hated like that growing up. And even when she went to college, she wasn't able to go take art. They made her take, like, bookkeeping.
So this is the...
So her whole life was controlled.
Right. This is the injury of control. So now talk to me about trauma bonding and how you familially bond to people who may not be the best for you. Do you have examples of how you've done that in your life?
I do.
Okay.
I had moved away from my mother back in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
I stayed gone for a decade, and that was the best that my life had ever been.
Okay.
I limited contact. I got away from all the toxic people.
Mm-hmm.
My brother and sister wanted to please my mom, so they too mistreated me.
Okay,
so
they joined
got
her.
away from here.
They joined her.
I'm sorry?
They joined her. Yeah, against you. Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that still kind of goes on to a degree, even though my mother passed away in 2014. But my sister and I, we're kind of establishing a relationship, but it's not easy because she's blocked everything out that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And her therapist is wanting her to go through trauma therapy,
Okay.
but don't think that she's ready for it.
Okay.
She just recently tried to commit suicide. My brother is currently in the hospital after an attempt.
You know, I'm thinking now of a Murray Bowen, who talks about the multi-generational transmission process, and he spoke of how every generation we're just going to break down more and more and more, and ultimately get so mentally dysfunctionally ill that we won't have much of a society at all. And so when you talk about this, I'm reminded of that and how important it is for parents to own their own stuff, which I'm a big proponent of, and to make sure that you do your work before you have children, or if you do have children, do the psychological work so that you could help your children clean up and not leave them stuck with low self-esteem and psychopathology and emotional dysregulation, everything that you're describing. So tell me a little bit about what kind. I know that you got away from them. The question I have is, did you really get away from the blueprint and the patterning, or did you choose people who eventually replicated?
No, I did not. My first husband was extremely controlling. Clothes, how much makeup, I couldn't cut my hair.
Yeah.
What I could watch on TV, what radio stations I was allowed to listen to.
Okay.
My whole life was controlled by him.
Okay.
He and I divorced, and that's when I just completely left everybody.
Okay, so back up for a minute, because I want everyone to understand the dynamics here, and what I've been talking about and what the research is showing is that the more people mistreat the trauma bonded person, the more they will chase the person. Is that something that you did as well?
I see that to be very true.
Okay.
What my mistake was my mother had a heart attack in 2008,
Mm-hmm.
and her health started deteriorating. So I ended up moving back.
Okay.
And by then, I had grandchildren back here in Mississippi. I moved like several states away,
Mm-hmm.
like over 500 miles away.
But
And
see,
it really wasn't far enough.
that's right, because as I say in my book and my mind map video series and in my therapy, and I teach my entire staff to remind people that the psychovirus goes in, and even though you move away, and even if your parents are deceased, it doesn't matter, because they've already injected their poison into your thinking. They've already encoded you with all this garbage and low self-esteem and negative core beliefs, and then you go and you chase that similar familiar person in order to close the psychological file, and with the wish that they would finish the business that your parents never did. So do you now see
Right.
why you chase? Because there's that wish and hope.
I'm understanding that now from watching your videos,
Okay.
and I'm seeing my past track record,
Mm-hmm.
because I jumped out of the fire from that first marriage and moving away right into the flame.
That's what we
I mean,
do.
out of the pan into the fire, because my second husband, only stayed with him for 9 weeks when it just got so volatile, abusive from right from the word go. And, you know, I started seeing the pattern. I did go through some extensive counseling. I actually moved into another state and stayed with my dad,
Okay.
the man that my parents divorced before I was 3, so I don't remember them being married.
And what's he like? What's your father like?
Well, I was told all my life that he was a monster. And when I was about 10, I told you my mother was a twin. I had 3 cousins, and of course they were close. And we grew up like siblings, and I had 2 siblings. So we grew up together, and out of 4 dads, my dad was the only one that ever came to see us.
Okay.
And I questioned my mom about that, and
Okay.
she broke my nose.
All right. So I guess your father, in some sense, even though he wasn't fully there all the time, he was a little bit
Well, he
of
was
a
in the
light.
Navy, so he was out on ship a
Okay.
lot.
Okay, but he was a point of light to you. He was a point of mental health to
Oh,
you.
I idolized my dad.
Yeah.
He was like my superhero.
Okay. Okay. And so you had that, and I think he saved your emotional butt, so to speak, in some sense. And so
He did.
it does.
I do wish that I could have, had stayed with him when I was younger. I wanted to,
Yeah.
like when we would go to visit,
Mhm.
but my mother wasn't going to have it.
But see, what's
And
interesting.
my dad would give in to her, and he's like, he wished that he could. He says, but there's going to be a constant fight and a battle, and he can't handle that either.
So
That was why he left.
okay.
And
So
we understood that.
So of the 2 people, which kind of relationship did you copycat? Did you copycat the relationship that you had more with your mother or with your father?
Well, I had 4 children, and I'm seeing now all of the love and stuff and nurturing that I did not get from my mother. I ended up smothering my kids.
Oh, so you
And
went the
2
other
of them are
direction.
suffering from that.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm to a point, I want to get to these core issues. I'm tired of dealing with this. I mean, I was diagnosed, I was thinking about suicide at ages 9 and 10 years old.
Okay.
I
So
did not want to live. I wanted to die.
mhm.
I even attempted suicide a few times.
So
I'm not proud of that, but
okay. So look,
this,
this is
I'm ready to heal.
okay. Okay. And sometimes life corners you this way, and if you look at panel number 6 as a metaphor for the final breakdown. The final breakdown, obviously, is suicide and sometimes homicide, and sometimes homicide-suicide, as in mass shootings. And these are the ultimate breakdowns we're experiencing as human beings. So I believe that when we get to this point where I call it the double dungeon of darkness, I write about it in my book, Be the Cause, which I'm reminding all of you, you can have free access to, PDF version. If you want to buy a hard copy of it, you can order it. In the book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, I talk about how when the child can no longer turn to the mother, and they cannot turn to the father because the father's not physically there or emotionally there, and there's not much on the inside that they can turn to because there's not enough strength built up in there. And so I call it turning to that emptiness, that hole in the soul. So when there's no place to go, there's a feeling of hopelessness. I call it the checkmate. And now we're in the double dungeon of darkness and there's nowhere to go. So can you understand why you would want to push the escape route and turn to suicide?
I totally get it. But
okay.
That's not what I really want.
No, I agree. You want
the pain to stop.
That's right. Thank you for saying that, because I wanted to bring that up to everybody. People don't really want to die. I don't think they want to die. They just want to get out of the pain and go toward the light. And so when they don't see any light, then they go back inwards. And when there's no resources inwards, then they will implode. And that's suicide. The implode is the suicide, and the explode and the projection onto other people is the homicide. And those are the extremes of panel number 6. So, okay, so go back for a moment.
When you're imploding, can that cause bad dreams and flashbacks of memories that you didn't know you even had?
I think, yeah, if you look at it as where do you turn to, so you go back into yourself, you're going in and in and in, and then the memories come and you're looping through and you're looping through these memories. So I think that you're still trying to work it through and still trying to work it through. And I want to share something hopeful that I got to hear today in my therapy room. And the person was sharing how their dream was starting to become very proactive. So rather than feeling at the effect of all the abuse, this particular person started actually confronting their perpetrator and powering up in the dream. So once you get on a healing path, you can find that power, you can find that indignation, and instead of imploding, even in the dream, you start becoming more powerful and assertive and confrontative. And like I said to this individual, remember the metaphor I use in the book about the Wicked Witch of the East. When you throw the truth at that witch, the witch starts to do what? Disintegrate. She starts to melt. Remember in The Wizard of Oz, she says, I'm melting. Okay, so it's the same thing. When we confront the lies, when we confront the misconceptions, when we confront the perpetrators, whether it be in reality or in the therapeutic process or even in our dreams, we have a new pathway out. And it's not suicide and it's not homicide. It's another pathway of finding dignity, finding truth, finding power, finding how to be at the cause and not at the effect of. So that's what we're looking for. The mind map is an escape route from psychological prison, is how I like to describe it. And instead of
description.
Thank you. Thank you. That's what it's meant to do. It's meant to identify how we get locked in prison and then dismantle the old system and then shift out of all of that so that you can reboot and have a new way of seeing and being in the world. And so as you're going through your process, I'm so glad you called because I know that you wanted to get some help, and I hope I've been helpful to you tonight, and the fact that you were courageous enough to tell your story on air. I hope you got value out of it and can now see how you gravitate toward the perpetrators, how you toxic bond to people, how you repeat these patterns with the hope, and everybody's out there hoping that they can change their perpetrators. They can change and create empathy in people who themselves haven't unfortunately been so injured that they don't have the empathy any longer. They're too defended. It's called that narcissistic shell. And they've been...
Well, I have great empathy for people, but what I've done, I've withdrawn from them. I've isolated myself. I don't get close to anybody anymore.
Okay.
My trust is just so shattered that I just really have great difficulty with it. Tonight, from what I've heard so far before I called in, made me realize why I moved back to Mississippi.
Yeah.
And I was really, all my life, was hoping to have a loving mother-daughter relationship, but that never happened. But now I will say this. The night before my mother died, she was battling cancer, was the first time I ever seen her break. I mean, she was completely broken.
She was.
First time she ever told me, and I've asked her over the years, because she would go into rages, and those were the times I got physically abused, and then she denied she'd done it, which was almost worse than the initial abuse. Because I'm thinking, how can someone do this to their child?
So what happened at the moment of death?
Well, she finally said she was sorry. She had a stroke, and it was really hard for her to talk. But she kept repeating it, and I mean, she was so broken.
You know, it's amazing.
That was the first time in my life that my mother said, "I love you" to me.
Wow. Isn't it crazy how it takes, for many, it never happens. And I think I even have an episode on that where, the final moments, we're waiting for our narcissistic parent to say, "I love you and I'm sorry," and we shouldn't hold our breath necessarily. In your case, you heard the words, and that's very, very rare. And that is a testament to how hard that narcissistic shell is. And sometimes it never cracks, and sometimes it will only crack at the moment of death, because now there's no ego to defend, right? There's nothing to defend because they're moving on to the next world. And I think that I'm very happy for you that you got to hear those words and just to witness the cracking of the shell. And many people don't get to hear that. So I will move on because I want to be able to take maybe one other caller if there's anybody else that wants to call in, and please do be in touch. And now go back over connecting the dots to everything that we just talked about, and now you can better understand yourself, and by understanding yourself you can look to the new life that you're going to be living, and this time you can know the warning signs and understand your old patterns and your vulnerabilities and heal those so that you don't have to do the WTF, the repeat WTF, okay? All right, so just keep in touch, and thank you so much for calling me today and tonight, and let me know how you're doing, okay?
Before I let you go, I really want to say thank you, because you have given me a light at the end of this dark tunnel that I've been in for decades.
I'm so glad to hear that.
And so thank you from the bottom of my heart.
You're so welcome. It's such an honor to be of service, and I can't thank you and everyone else out there who acknowledge me and the work and the team. It does make a difference, and in my world, there's nothing better than to make a difference in another human being's life. So really, really appreciate that.
And we do as well.
Okay. All right. Have a good evening, and be in
you.
touch. Okay. Okay.
I
Thank
will
you.
do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Yeah. Okay. I think we have another caller. Yes. Hello. You are on the couch with Dr. Judy. And what is your name, please?
My name is Michelle from Montana.
Hi, Michelle. How are you? Nice to talk to you.
Thank you. I talked to you a week before Mother's Day. I'm the one that ended up in the tub. My mom left me there for 2 days. That's me.
Oh, my God. Okay. All right. So,
yeah.
all right.
I did talk to you.
Jeez. Well, it's nice to hear from you again. And if you can please just explain to the audience how your toxic bonding process has worked, how you have how you relate to the topic of trauma bonding, and how your injuries have led you to trauma bond with people who have probably hurt you in similar ways.
Yes. Of course, my mom, as abusive she was, then I went on and married 2 men. It's like I want to say I moved up into higher levels, but I don't like that word. My first husband, I ended up marrying a pedophile for 9 years who assaulted my daughter for 8 years, who now has control of my adult daughter. And
it's almost
I
like
think she's
Stockholm.
bonded.
Yeah, she trauma bonded. I was going to say it's almost like the Stockholm Syndrome happened to your daughter. Yes.
Yes, because when my granddaughter a year and a half ago said that Papa had been tickling her between the legs, she got on the phone with him and he played, "I would never do that, lose your trust again." And she said, her exact words were, "I love my daughter, but I can't lose my dad again." Although he is not her dad. She was 2 years old when we married. That's just one example. I know my daughter is. But then when I divorced him, that's another topic. But I married my last husband, who we are now divorced, and I found out this whole last year was my discard year. Even though we separated, he was still telling me he loved me and he was staying at his aunt's, all the while he was priming someone new. And now I'm replaying everything. Here's where the trauma bond is.
Wow.
When I left my first ex, I didn't have a trauma bond because he hurt my daughter. I was done.
Okay.
But this last one, all from day one, he lied, he cheated, I caught him, and he would come to me, "I'm so sorry." He played it off about his ex-wife, and I kept believing him. But then it got worse. His different personality, his social media accounts, and his lies, and just everything that he continued to do. I believe he's actually a sociopath. Not just a narcissist. I think he's a very high level, just with everything, but too much to go into right now.
Wow. Okay. So,
but when this all happened, I'll give you a couple more examples, but I am constantly, I don't know if this is the right word, reminiscing and going over the last 19 years with this last husband. And I have nightmares, and I know I'm trauma bonded. I believe I'm trauma bonded from him because I can't escape it right now.
And I bet
I
bet you miss him. Yes.
Yes, very much so.
Yes, and I bet you wish that you behaved differently, and then maybe if you behaved differently, he would have loved you and would have accepted you. Yes.
Yes, and all through the years when he said, "Well, if I could do this," and I would then change my morals and values in a way to compensate and conform to his ways of thinking. Like when he said that all people cheat, I was like, "Well, if you're going to cheat, at least tell me." So then he threw it in my face one time and called me and said, "Well, I'm not coming home for dinner And well, I actually was talking to a therapist back in that time. It was back in 2010, and she said, talk about being honest with him. So I did. So he calls me up, and he goes, well, don't worry about dinner. I'm like, why? He goes, because I'm going to a hotel to go screw this woman.
So
And
he
then when
went
he
from
come
being a
home
covert cheater to an over cheater. So let me ask you this. Tell me the blueprint that lies behind this, because this did not happen out of thin air. And I also want to address the part where there's logic and there's psychologic. Okay, so logically, you know that this person is not worth your breath, is not worth your thoughts, is not worth space in your head. Yet psychologically, and this has to do with back to Freud's theory of the repetition principle, he left the psychological file incomplete. It's open. Your parents did it. He did it. Now, in order for you to close the psychological mind in your unconscious world, you have to make it right. And in order to make it right, you have to please the parents. You have to please the husband. You have to please, and then you will win the golden chalice of redemption of not being good enough, not being smart enough, not being pretty enough. So I want to know the blueprint of where this came from. What were your childhood injuries?
Well, my mom, I believe it was a narcissist, as I talked to you about some of the things she did when I was drinking the wine and she left me in the tub for 2 days. That's just one thing. She abandoned me.
Okay.
I was also molested by several men. My mom, I don't know if I told you this that week before Mother's Day when she drugged me down the sidewalk. I think I did, and she pushed me in the house as a pedophile. But she abandoned me a lot. My stepdad, when I was 10, when I was laying in bed, I was with him one time. He did something to me. When I was 11 and I met my real dad, he said I needed to learn how to French kiss and was kissing me.
Yeah.
I was raped at 13.
I mean, I can't imagine a worse panel one blueprint, and you literally replicated everything. You married the pedophile, and you married the cheater. You married the narcissistic person who didn't really have any empathy toward you, and tortured you with cheating in front of your face and behind your back in any which way he could. And so,
and more than that, he would tell lies. Like when I would find a woman and I'd say, that's my husband, this happened so many times. We're talking like double digits. And so that woman would contact him and he would say, no, I'm Jim from Texas. That woman's a stalker. That's how she knows about my tattoo.
Right.
Don't talk to her anymore. And then they would say, no, I'm not to talk to you anymore because that man says that.
So look, I want to...
Like, I'm his wife.
Okay, so
and
this...
he just would say so many bad things.
So,
and he created multiple personalities on social media.
So the reason this goes on and on and on and on, and and we can definitely talk some more just for the sake of time. Your story can go on and on and on, and you're giving so many examples of. And you're a smart woman. I mean, if this were a matter of logic, you would have been out of there in a heartbeat.
No contact. Yeah.
Okay, but see, this is the trauma bond.
But
that we go
I'm trauma
back.
bond, and that's what I
right. So here is the key to untrauma bonding. It's a tough one. However, we've got to go to the original, and the original. All of the people that followed the original, which is your mother and your father, the primary caregivers, were triggers and repeats, okay? So instead of the original DNA, they were just like the knockoffs, let's call them. So we've got to go back to the original wound reprocess those feelings and reboot the system. So just for the sake of time, I want the audience to really go back and connect the dots and get a free copy of my book if you haven't already, because it'll help you connect the dots. And if you want to go through the mind map process, then there are different levels at which you can do it. You could do the mind map video series, which I've kept at $195 just because I think it's chock full of information, and I didn't want to create a resistance to having that. And then we have a beautiful team of people who can help. And Michelle, be in touch with me, because this psychovirus will continue to repeat itself until somebody busts the game. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Shrink That Tune, and thank you so much for calling in. And I'm really sorry you had to go through this, and now consider going back to the cause and, for the final time, closing these psychological files. Okay, so I'm going to go on to Muna, Crying on the Bathroom Floor. These are the lyrics. And of course, I picked it because it represents the trauma bond. Give me that diamond ring, give me that love on the movie screen, and I won't feel a thing. Promise, I won't feel a thing. Give me that kiss goodnight, give me a call, tell me it's all right, and I won't feel a thing. So here, that person is crying for help. They want the shiny, they want the kiss, and yet they've defended. I won't feel a thing, meaning that, it's okay, you can invest in me, and I'm not gonna disrupt your world. I'm just gonna be defended. And I guess that I got rewired, because you're cold as ice, but it feels like fire, fire, fire. So she couldn't really erect those psychological walls, because she feels the pain, and the drugs don't work, and I don't know why. So here's a person who is vulnerable and can't erect the walls. But when you hurt me, I go higher, higher, higher. So here's the drug, here's the love addiction, here's the trauma bond. The pain is the drug getting her higher. But when I'm crying on the bathroom floor, tearing off the dress I wore, I wonder if you could never ask for more. If I'm never going to ask for more from a lover, crying on the bathroom floor, tearing off the dress I wore, I can never ask for more. So she doesn't know what to do. Give me your pain and loneliness. So she's saying to the person, project on me. Give me the pain and the loneliness. And I'll love you the best. Promise I'll love you the best. Give me no peace of mind. Project on me. I'll feel your pain. I'm useful to you. I can just soak it up. Promise I'll love you till I die, but I'm crying on the bathroom floor. So here's a person who's definitely throwing herself under the bus to get this person to love her. If I'm never going to ask for more from a lover, it's asking a lot of myself. It's taking a lot out of me loving you. So she's being vampired. It's taking a lot. And if you're calling in, just call the Psychological Healing Center and we'll talk to you tomorrow, because the show's just about up. If I'm never going to ask for more from a lover, crying on the bathroom floor, tearing off the dress I wore, I wonder if I could ever ask for more. If I'm never going to ask for more from a lover. So this lady is bonded, and she'll do anything, and she'll even soak up the other person's pain, anything to be loved, anything to fill the hole in the soul that was created way back in the first few years of life. So please be in touch, and caller, please call in tomorrow at the Psychological Healing Center. And thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for all your lovely acknowledgement of the team, of myself, of the work. And I will see you next time. Good night, everyone.